I'm Katie Spadoro with Cyber. It's Friday, May 22nd, and this is your Small Business Weekly HR update. The U.S. EEOC has sued a Phoenix call center and its staffing agency, saying it fired workers because of their pregnancies. As a growing business, these things can be devastating. The staffing agency placed at least 2 pregnant women at the call center as customer service representatives. After only 1 week of training, the workers were fired because the company assumed that they would not be able to comply with its attendance policy, is what the EEOC said. The staffing company understood that the women were terminated for unlawful reasons. However, it did not take appropriate corrective action and continued to place employees at the call center. According to the EEOC, discrimination based on pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions is a prohibited form of sex discrimination. This is prohibited under the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, the PDA, which amended Title VII, which is the big law. Employers cannot fire, refuse to hire, demote, or take any other adverse action against a worker simply because she is pregnant. In other words, pregnancy cannot be a motivating factor for any adverse employment action. As far as leave is concerned, an employer must treat pregnancy-related medical leave the same as any other type of medical leave. Employees cannot impose greater restrictions on pregnancy-related medical leave. For instance, an employer cannot fire or discipline a pregnant employee for being absent if the absence is covered by the employer's sick leave or their PTO policy. An employer also cannot make pregnant employees use up their sick leave before other types of leave if the company does not also require the same of employees with other medical conditions. Additionally, employers should not make employment decisions based on assumptions about what pregnant employees can and cannot do, according to the EEOC again. Pregnancy discrimination continues to be a significant barrier for women. Employees should look at including the PDA in management training for all managers and their supervisors. Call Cyber today if you have a growing business and you'd like help creating a customized training of any kind for your workplace. On May 15th, the House passed a new relief bill that would require employers to provide paid sick leave and emergency FMLA leave to workers regardless of company size. This new bill would also temporarily suspend minimum hour eligibility requirements and reduce the tenure requirements for non-emergency FMLA. This bill is coming in part because the Democrats and employee advocates are concerned that the FFCRA did not include leave for workers at large companies with more than 500 employees and workers in certain essential industries. The new bill is called the Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act, the HEROES Act, which would grant paid leave to more employees and allow leave for additional needs through the end of 2021. The law would also include other items such as funding for certain employers to pay essential workers $13 an hour throughout the pandemic. It would also require OSHA to issue infection control standards, including anti-retaliation provisions for workers who report violations. However, this bill is not in law yet, so we will be following the news closely to see if it passes the Senate. Be sure to follow us on social media so you can keep up to date with any of the latest developments that will affect your business. Next up, in a case decided by the 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, Huntington Ford's stated reasons for firing an employee may have been pretext for age discrimination. In this case, a longtime car salesperson sued his former employer, Huntington Ford, for firing him because of his age in violation of the ADEA. The plaintiff had worked at the car dealership for over 10 years. He was 63 years old and the oldest salesperson at the dealership. The plaintiff was an excellent performer who had won multiple awards from both Ford Motor Company and Huntington Ford for his sales records. During the 10 years he worked at Huntington Ford, he was only formally disciplined twice. According to the plaintiff, he was called Grandpa, Dinosaur, and Over the Hill by his supervisors. A week before the termination occurred, he stated that a manager told him that he was, quote, too old to have a desk in the front of the showroom, unquote, and that the station should be assigned to someone younger. The plaintiff complained about the comment, but nothing was done, which is the biggest issue. A week later, the plaintiff was involved in an altercation with a coworker during which he was shoved by the coworker. The plaintiff was suspended for a week and then returned to work. When he returned to work, he was told that he was being terminated for failing to report to work or call in during the previous week. The Sixth Circuit determined that the plaintiff provided evidence that Huntington's stated reason for termination could have absolutely been a pretext for age discrimination. The court notes that Huntington supposedly fired the plaintiff partly because he failed to show up for work while suspended, and that Huntington Ford relied on completely unrelated disciplinary documents from 4 years ago. Neither of these are solid reasons or documentation for a termination. They could have been cover-ups for age discrimination. Without complete or current disciplinary records and taking into account the insults targeted at the plaintiff, the Sixth Court granted the plaintiff a chance to take the case to trial. This case comes with some very good lessons for small growing businesses. First, before you terminate an employee, make sure that you have a solid, updated record of corrective actions or any other documentation to back up your business reason for termination. Second, be sure to train your supervisors and managers on appropriate language to use in the workplace. Lastly, if an employee complains, have your HR department or cyber handle it correctly the first time. If you have a growing business, Cyber has a complete termination packet available for you. You can get it on our website. We can assist you with all of your terminations. Don't let your company get in trouble or get sued because you fired somebody without a professional's help. Lastly, we do have one more employment case for you tonight. This one involves the ADA and reasonable accommodations. In this case, the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals determines that a food service staffing agency adequately accommodated an employee. The employee, Suzanne TL, a head cook for a school district, claimed that her employer failed to accommodate her disability. She claimed she was fired because she had a knee injury and had requested a reasonable accommodation. TL's supervisor noticed her leaning on a rolling food cart to help her walk. She requested a cane as a reasonable accommodation and was then allowed to use a cane to help her walk. TL was then told to not lean on the rolling food cart because it could tip over, obviously causing injury to herself and potentially others. However, she continued to lean on the food cart. Her employer warned her and told her that continuing to behave in this unsafe manner would most likely result in her termination. TL was then terminated and sued her employer. The court stated that the staffing agency did reasonably accommodate TL. She asked to use a cane and was allowed to do so. There was no evidence that she had asked to use a food cart as a reasonable accommodation for her issue. While the ADA generally obligates employers to provide workers with reasonable accommodations, it does not entitle workers to their preferred choice of obligation. So employers are still able to have and enforce safety rules and do not have to accommodate something that would be unsafe. To reduce the risk of legal action, you should ensure that your supervisors are trained on the ADA and all that goes along with reasonable accommodations and how to handle the situation. Thank you for checking us out. We appreciate it always. Happy Friday. We hope you have a great weekend. Send us an email at info@cybhr.co with any questions.